The laugh. That's the sound I'll never forget. It wasn't joyful. It was the sound of my son, Tyler, telling me he sold my 40-year legacy, the Willow Creek Estate, for a 2-week trip to the Bahamas and a paltry $200,000. He thought it was a victory. I knew it was the beginning of the end for his manipulative wife. This is the story of how I took back everything they stole from me. And then some. If you believe that justice should always be served, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. The laugh. That's the sound that broke something inside me. It wasn't the warm, hearty laugh of a son sharing a fond memory with his father. It was a hollow, airy sound, thin and dismissive, the kind of laugh you use when you think you've finally pulled one over on the old man, proving you're smarter than he gives you credit for. And in the cavernous silence of a home that suddenly felt like a stranger's that sound was an act of war. For 40 years, I had poured my life into the Willow Creek Estate. I wasn't born into this life. I carved it out of the stubborn Texas soil with my own 2 hands. This land and we have an understanding. I can walk the fields in the dead of night and know exactly where I am by the feel of the ground beneath my boots and the way the wind whispers through the ancient oaks that line the creek. I remember planting those oaks with my own father. 2 generations of calloused hands tamping down the soil, a silent promise to the future. This land isn't just an asset on a balance sheet. It's a living ledger of my sweat, my worries, and my triumphs. Paid for. With a currency of sunrises, I watched while the rest of the world slept. I remember holding my son, Tyler, when he was just a boy. His small, soft hand completely lost in my rough one. We stood on this very porch, the wood worn smooth by a lifetime of footsteps. I pointed out to the horizon, where the land met the impossibly vast sky. One day, son, I told him, the words feeling heavy with legacy. All of this will be yours. It will test you. It will demand everything from you. But if you respect it, it will provide for you and yours forever. I truly believed he understood the weight of that promise. Then, Isabella arrived. She didn't just enter Tyler's life, she annexed it. Their romance was a whirlwind. A 6-month blur of expensive dinners and weekend trips that culminated in an engagement announcement. She was, by all accounts, perfect. It was her perfection that set my teeth on edge. She possessed a flawless smile, a business degree she mentioned with casual frequency, and a seemingly encyclopedic knowledge of how to charm everyone she met. At family dinners, she'd praise my wife Sarah's cooking with specific notes on the seasoning, then turn to me and ask about futures markets and crop yields with an unnerving precision. Her questions didn't feel like curiosity. They felt like an audit. But her eyes were the tell. They were beautiful. A deep, clear brown. But they never smiled with the rest of her face. When she looked at you, it felt like she was calculating your net worth. When she looked at the ranch, it was with the acquisitive gleam of a hawk spotting its prey from 1,000 feet up. Sarah was completely enchanted. She's so sharp and ambitious. Chester, she'd say, her voice full of a mother's hope. She's exactly the kind of woman Tyler needs to light a fire under him. Maybe. But my gut, a well-honed compass that had guided me through 4 decades of unpredictable markets and even more unpredictable weather, was screaming a 5-alarm fire warning. It was a low, persistent hum of wrongness I couldn't ignore. The morning after they announced their engagement, I found myself in my study. The door closed. Phone in hand. I called Elena Ramirez. She's a bulldog who used to be a hard-nosed litigator in Dallas before opening a very discreet, very expensive private investigation firm. Elena. It's Chester, I said, keeping my voice low. I have a new prospective daughter-in-law. She's polished. Too polished. I want to know where the shine comes from. I want to know everything. It felt like a deep betrayal of my own son, but a primal, protective instinct told me it was the most important insurance policy I'd ever buy. A few months later, just as Elena's first preliminary report landed on my desk, my own body decided to stage a rebellion. The doctors called it a major cardiac event, a triple bypass. It felt less like a wake-up call and more like a head-on collision with a freight train. Lying in that sterile, white cocoon of an ICU room, I was no longer the master of a sprawling estate. I was a prisoner, tethered to a symphony of machines that beeped and whirred, measuring out my life in electronic pulses. My world shrank to the four walls, the antiseptic smell, and the relentless, rhythmic sigh of the ventilator. For weeks, I drifted in and out of a fog, my only connection to the world being Sarah's tired, brave face. All I could think about, in the lucid moments, was the ranch. Not about dying, but about what would happen to my life's work if I did. The thought of it falling into neglect, or worse, being sold off piece by piece by a son who understood its price but not its value, was a fear far greater than death itself. Coming home was like surfacing from a deep dive. I was weaker, thinner, with a jagged roadmap of scars hidden beneath my shirt. But I was breathing my own air on my own land, the familiar scent of hay, dry earth, and distant cattle was the best medicine they could have offered. But inside the house, something was fundamentally wrong. The warm, lived-in clutter of our life had been replaced by a sterile, minimalist tidiness. Vases of expensive, scentless flowers stood on polished surfaces. It felt like a show home. It felt like Isabella. The air itself was thick with unspoken words. Tyler was a ghost in his own home. He'd offer a quick, tight smile, his eyes darting away from mine. He was constantly on his phone, his thumbs flying across the screen. And he'd leave the room if I entered. Sarah just seemed exhausted, the light in her eyes dimmed by a worry she wouldn't name. The dam finally broke a week after my return. It was late afternoon, and the study was filled with golden light, dust motes dancing in the sunbeams. I was nursing a small glass of whiskey, the first the doctor had permitted, savoring the familiar burn. "Tyler," I said, my voice still carrying the rasp of intubation. "Look at me. Talk to me. What have you done?" He flinched as if I'd struck him. He sank into the leather armchair opposite my desk, the chair seeming to swallow him whole. His face was ashen. "Dad, look. While you were recovering, an opportunity came up. I made a business decision." He was trying to sound confident, but his voice cracked on the last word. I waited, saying nothing, letting the silence press down on him. My stillness was always more effective than yelling. "I sold off a piece of the land." He rushed out, the words tumbling over each other. "Just a small parcel. Really. Unproductive. The old St. Sebastian plot. It was just sitting there." A block of ice formed in my stomach. The St. Sebastian plot was the heart of Willow Creek, the land my own grandfather had first settled. But I kept my face a mask of calm. "And why exactly did you do that?" "Isabella and I. We had some debts." Nothing major. But, you know, and we never got a proper honeymoon. She's brilliant. Dad. She found a buyer. Handled the negotiation. Got us a fantastic deal. It cleared everything up and gave us enough for an incredible trip to the Bahamas. She's there now. Actually. Scouting the resort. The block of ice in my stomach began to spread, chilling my veins. I focused on the amber liquid in my glass, swirling it slowly. How much? Tyler. He finally looked at me then, a pathetic flicker of pride in his eyes. He thought this was his moment of triumph. $200,000. All cash. Isabella is a genius with contracts. Dad, you should see her work. 200,000. The number was so laughably, tragically small that it defied reason. It hung in the air between us. An insult of monumental proportions. A sound bubbled up from my chest. A short, sharp, bitter laugh that held no humor. And that's when he laughed with me. His was light and relieved. The sound of a man who thought he'd just escaped a lecture. He thought I was pleased. He thought I was impressed. I know. Right, he said. A wide, foolish grin spreading across his face. It's a great price for a piece of land that was just for cattle anyway. And that was it. That was the line. The ignorance. The disrespect. The sheer, breathtaking foolishness of that statement. The smile dissolved from my face, replaced by a cold, hard stillness. I placed my glass down on the solid oak desk. I didn't slam it, but the sound it made, a solid, definitive thud, seemed to shake the very dust motes from the air. Tyler's grin faltered, then died completely. Just for cattle, I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. Each word, a chip of ice. Son, do you have any idea what you've actually done? His face went blank with confusion. What do you mean, it's just land? You have thousands of acres. That just land? I said, leaning forward, my voice dropping lower. Has 3 of the most productive underground wells in this entire county. The city of Northwood, as you might recall from the 20 years you've lived here, has a contract with this family for their municipal water supply. A contract that pays us $1.2 million. Every single year. That land, Tyler, the one you sold for a beach vacation, with its water rights, has a conservative valuation of $15 million. The blood drained from his face so fast he turned a sickly gray. He looked like he'd been physically struck, his mouth hanging open, a silent O forming on his lips. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a dawning, catastrophic horror, as the scale of his stupidity crashed down upon him. I let him sit there and drown in it. I watched the cocky young businessman dissolve, replaced by the scared little boy who had just broken his father's most prized possession. And in that moment, the grief and the shock inside me burned away, leaving behind something cold, hard, and terrifyingly clear. I laughed again. It was not a pleasant sound. It was the sound of an engine turning over, of gears locking into place. It was the sound of a man who had just been handed a declaration of war and was preparing to answer it in kind. 200,000, I said, the words dripping with a chilling amusement. Son, you traded an empire for a sand castle. He just shook his head, whispering, frantic. No. She said she looked at the county records. She showed me the paperwork. She said it was just grazing land. She studied you. Tyler, I said, my voice now a near whisper. Yet it carried more weight than any shout. She studied you like a textbook and learned exactly how to pass the test. But she made one fatal mistake. She didn't study me. Now, sit down and shut up. Let me tell you about your loving wife. My son's face was a canvas of disbelief, the last vestiges of his smug confidence crumbling into dust. He stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. As the sheer, catastrophic weight of the numbers, $15 million, settled upon him. The silence in the study was no longer just quiet, it was a physical presence. Heavy and suffocating, broken only by the frantic, shallow sound of his own breathing. No, he whispered. The word, a desperate plea. No, you're mistaken. Dad, it's an old plot of land. Isabella had it appraised. She showed me the paperwork. I didn't move. I didn't raise my voice. I simply held his gaze, letting the terrible truth I had just revealed do its work. The paperwork she showed you, I said, my voice as level and cold as polished stone, was for the land without its mineral and water rights. A shell, a worthless husk. She knew exactly what she was doing. I reached down beside my chair and lifted a heavy manila folder onto the polished oak of the desk. It landed with a soft, definitive thud. There was no fancy label. Just a single name, handwritten on the tab, Isabella. Tyler flinched as if the folder itself was a snake. You see, son, I continued, my eyes never leaving his. When a fox gets into the henhouse, you don't just get angry. You study the fox. You learn how it thinks, where it came from, and what it's really after. I opened the folder. Inside were not rambling notes, but a clinical, detailed report, compiled by the best. Elena Ramirez doesn't deal in speculation. She deals in cold, hard, verifiable facts. I slid the top page across the desk towards him. It was a professional headshot of Isabella. Smiling hair, dazzling, empty smile. Below it, the text began. You can't believe this. Tu l'estimes. His hands shaking as he reached for the paper. This is just dirt. You hired someone to dig up because you never liked her. Keep reading, I said. He scanned the first page, his eyes darting back and forth. I knew what he was seeing. Isabella, born Jessica Ann Miller. The forged transcripts to get into a business school she was later expelled from. The first job at a tech startup in Austin. Terminated after 6 months for what the official record called accounting irregularities. The unofficial record, which Elena had sourced from a very bitter ex-colleague, called it outright embezzlement of $50,000. Settled quietly out of court to avoid a scandal. This is insane, he breathed. But the conviction in his voice was failing. People make mistakes when they're young. Dad, it doesn't mean she's a monster. I slid another document across the desk. This one was a legal paper. A copy of a restraining order filed 3 years ago in California. The petitioner was a man named Michael Byrne, her ex-boyfriend. The details were stark. He claimed she had systematically drained his life savings nearly $800,000 through a series of forged checks and unauthorized transfers before vanishing. Tyler stared at the paper, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. I could see the wheels turning in his mind. The denial fighting a losing battle against the ugly, documented truth. I saw him remember all the little things, the small inconsistencies and red flags he had so eagerly ignored. The way Isabella was always vague about her time in California, the way she'd laughed off his suggestion to visit her old college campus, the way her stories about her past jobs never quite lined up. Each memory was now another nail in the coffin of the woman he thought he loved. He dropped the papers onto the desk as if they were burning his fingers. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders beginning to shake. A rough, guttural sob ripped from his throat, a sound of such profound agony that for a fleeting moment, the father in me wanted to reach out and comfort him. But I held back. This was a lesson that had to be learned through pain. This was a wound that had to be cauterized. Just then, my phone, sitting on the corner of the desk, buzzed. The screen lit up with Elena's name. I put it on speaker. Chester. Her voice came through, crisp and all business. I have an update, and you're not going to like it. Tyler looked up, his face tear-streaked and ravaged. Go ahead, Elena. I said. Our buyer, Mr. Marco Vargas, is not a legitimate real estate investor. He's a ghost. The LLC he used to purchase the property is a shell company, and my sources confirm he's a known associate of the Juarez cartel. He's a professional money launderer. Chester, a very dangerous one. By selling that land to him, Isabella hasn't just committed fraud. She's willingly participated in a federal money laundering scheme. The last remnants of color drained from Tyler's face. He looked from the phone to me, his eyes wide with a new kind of terror. This was no longer about being fooled or losing an inheritance. This was about federal prison. This was about cartels. The $4 million she has stashed in the Caymans, Elena continued, her voice grim. That's not just her profit. It's a payment from the cartel. She helped them turn dirty money into a clean-looking asset. The FBI has had a file on Vargas for a year. This transaction just lit him up like a Christmas tree. And Isabella is tied right to him. The call ended. The silence that followed was heavier than a tombstone. Tyler was no longer crying. He was frozen, paralyzed by a fear so profound, it seemed to have stolen the very air from his lungs. He finally looked at me. The arrogance and naivety gone, replaced by the terrified desperation of a drowning man. Dad, he choked out, the word barely a whisper. Dad, what do I do, oh God? What have I done? Please, please, help me. This was the moment, the true turning point. He was broken, utterly and completely. He was finally ready to listen. I stood up, walked over to the large map of the county that hung on my wall. A map I'd looked at every day for 40 years. My finger traced the borders of our property, the sprawling expanse of Willow Creek. She thought she was stealing the crown jewels. I said quietly, my back still to him, but all she got was the velvet box they came in. I turned back to him. 6 months ago, right after I hired Elena, and my gut was screaming at me. I took a trip to my lawyer. We restructured the entire estate. Willow Creek is no longer one single property. I walked back to the desk and pulled out a different folder. This one contained survey maps and freshly filed deeds. I spread them out for him to see. I divided the estate into 3 separate legal parcels. Parcel A contains the main house, the barns, and the immediate pastures. Parcel B, I said, tapping a large, central section of the map, contains all 3 underground wells and the entirety of the water access rights. It is held by a separate trust that you and Isabella have no access to. What you sold. Son, what she thought she was selling was Parcel C. My finger moved to a thin, awkwardly shaped sliver of land along the far western border. It's the least valuable piece of the whole ranch. It's rocky. It's hard to access. And it has no independent water source. Legally, it's still called the St. Sebastian plot on the county records, a name I made sure to keep for sentimental reasons. Or, as it turns out, for strategic ones. She was so arrogant, so sure of her research on the old name, that she never bothered to check the new surveys or the specifics of the water rights deeds. She played a con, and I laid a trap for that con months before she even knew she was in it. Tyler stared at the maps, a flicker of something awe, disbelief, hope dawning in his eyes. He looked up at me, truly seeing me for the first time in years, not as an aging father, but as the strategist I'd always had to be. So she has nothing, he asked, his voice trembling. She has a worthless piece of rock and $4 million of cartel money that the FBI is about to seize. I corrected him, and we are going to help them. That's when the plan, which had been forming like a storm cloud in my mind, was finally spoken aloud. Elena had already laid the legal groundwork. With the evidence of the fraudulent sale and the connection to federal crimes, we had leverage, but we needed one more thing. We needed an irrefutable confession, straight from her own mouth. "You are going to call her," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "You are going to tell her that I know about the sale and I'm about to call the lawyers. You are going to sound panicked, scared. You will let her think she's still in control, that she needs to calm down her stupid, clueless husband. And in her arrogance, she will admit everything. Elena will have the entire call recorded." Tyler looked terrified at the prospect, but I saw a new resolve hardening in his eyes. The desire for redemption. "I'll do it," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I'll do whatever you say." We spent the next hour preparing. I coached him, giving him his lines, his motivation. He had to be the same naive, easily manipulated man she thought she had married. That evening, a heavy stillness settled over the house. Sarah had gone to her sister's for the night. Sensing a storm, she didn't understand. It was just Tyler and me in the study. The recording equipment was set up, a small, discreet device connected to my phone. Elena was on standby, listening in from her office in Austin. The weight of what we were about to do was immense. I poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handing one to my son. We didn't speak. There were no more apologies or recriminations left to say. There was only a grim, shared purpose that hung in the air between us. A fragile bridge being built over the smoking ruins of his mistakes. It took a deep, shuddering breath, his hand trembling as he picked up his cell phone. He looked at me, his eyes asking one last time if he could do this. I gave him a single, slow nod. He swiped the screen and hit her name. The phone began to ring, the sound deafeningly loud in the silent room. Once, twice. On the 3rd ring, she picked up, her voice, cheerful, carefree, and 1,000 miles away, filled the speakerphone, dripping with a sweet, poisonous hypocrisy. "Hey, honey, how's everything? You would not believe the view from this balcony." Her voice filled the study. A grotesque parody of warmth and affection piped in from a sun-drenched paradise. "Hey, honey, how's everything? You would not believe the view from this balcony." On her end, I could hear the faint, cheerful sound of steel drums. the gentle whisper of a sea breeze. On our end. The silence was so absolute, it felt like a physical pressure against my eardrums. The only sound was the frantic thumping of my own heart and the almost inaudible hum of the recording device. Tyler was frozen for a half-second, his face a mask of pale, sweaty determination. I gave him a slight, almost imperceptible nod. It was time. The curtain was rising on the final act of his life with this woman. He drew a shaky breath, channeling every ounce of fear he'd felt over the past few hours into his voice. "Isabella, baby, we have a problem," he said, his voice a pitch-perfect imitation of a man on the verge of panic. "A huge problem. My dad knows. He knows about the sale. He's in his study right now. And he's furious." From the speakerphone, her laugh came, light and tinkling, completely devoid of concern. It was the laugh of someone who believed they held all the cards. "Oh? Relax. Sweetie?" she cooed, her voice dripping with condescension. "Breathe. What's the old man gonna do? He's still weak from surgery. Besides, he signed the papers. It's all legal and done. There's nothing he can do." I watched my son. This was his first test. He had to push back, to sell the fear. He swallowed hard, the sound audible in the quiet room. "No, you don't understand. He's saying he never signed any power of attorney. He's saying his signature was forged." Another sigh from Isabella's end, this one laced with impatience, as if explaining a simple concept to a child. "Oh, for heaven's sake. Tyler, of course he didn't sign it. You idiot. I signed it." There it was, the first confession, offered up with breathtaking arrogance. I practiced his signature for weeks, using copies of old checks from his desk. It was a perfect match. He can claim whatever he wants. It won't matter. It's my word against the word of a sick old man. Tyler pushed on, his voice rising in manufactured hysteria. "But the money, Isabella, he's not mad about the 200,000. He's saying the ranch was worth $15 million. This time, her laugh was sharper, a genuine bark of amusement at his naivete. 15 million. Oh, honey. That was the low estimate. With the new development plans for the county, those water rights are probably worth closer to 20. You really have no idea about the world you were born into. Do you? Confession number 2. Knowingly and willfully committing fraud on a massive scale. I felt a cold, grim satisfaction settle over me. She was so sure of herself, so wrapped up in her own brilliance, that she couldn't see the noose she was tightening around her own neck. Tyler played his part to perfection, his voice cracking with despair. 20 million. But the buyer. Vargas, he only paid 2 million for it. Where's the rest of the money? Isabella, where is it? Lower your voice, she snapped, her tone suddenly turning to ice. The charming wife was gone, replaced by the cold, hard criminal. You need to listen to me very carefully. This is business for adults. So try to keep up. Marco and I are partners. He needed to turn a large sum of cash into a hard asset. I needed to get paid. He got the land to launder his money. I got a wire transfer for $4 million to a very safe, very private account in the Cayman Islands. And you, she said, her voice softening into that sickeningly sweet tone again. You got your debts paid off and a beautiful vacation. Everybody wins. It's called a win-win. Honey. Confession number 3. conspiracy, partnership with a known criminal, and the admission of a hidden, illicit payment. It was more than enough. I caught Tyler's eye and slowly, deliberately, gave the signal. I watched my son's face, seeing the last flicker of his old life, his old love for this woman. In his eyes, it was replaced by something cold and hard, a reflection of my own resolve. While Isabella continued to lecture him on the complexities of their business, my hand moved to my other phone, where Elena had been listening in on mute. I sent her a single, prearranged text, "Go." Almost instantly, I heard the faint, rapid clicking of her keyboard through my earpiece. She was uploading the recording to a secure FBI server and simultaneously firing off an email to her contact in the white-collar crime division. The trap was now in motion, a silent, legal machine grinding to life 1,000 miles away. "So you just need to calm down and handle your father," Isabella was saying. "Tell him you made an executive decision. Be a man." For once, that was her final mistake. Tyler's posture changed. The slump of fear was gone. He sat up straight, the phone still pressed to his ear. But his voice, when he spoke, was devoid of any panic. It was chillingly calm. "You know, Isabella," he said, the words clear and precise. "Dad told me something just before I made this call. He said, your biggest mistake was that you studied me, but you didn't do your homework on him." A moment of confused silence on the other end. "What the hell are you talking about?" "Tyler, are you drunk?" "No." Tyler said, "I've never been more sober in my life. The land you bought, the St. Sebastian plot, it's worthless. 6 months ago, my father legally subdivided the entire estate. All the water rights, all the value, were transferred to a separate parcel held in a family trust. The piece of land you and your cartel friend now own is a strip of useless rock on the far side of the property." The silence on the other end of the line was now absolute. The steel drums had stopped. I could picture her perfectly standing on her balcony, the tropical breeze suddenly feeling cold, the million-dollar view turning into the backdrop of a prison. "Goodbye, Isabella," Tyler said, and with a final, steady tap of his finger, he ended the call. He dropped the phone on the desk as if it were a dead thing. He slumped back in his chair, his entire body trembling with the adrenaline crash. But he had done it. He had walked through the fire and come out the other side. In my mind's eye, I saw the chaos erupting in that luxury hotel room. I saw her frantically trying to call back, the calls going straight to voicemail. I saw her open her banking app, her heart pounding, expecting to see a balance of $4 million. I saw the screen load, and the number that appeared $0. Ling. I pictured the color draining from her face as she read the notification, "Account frozen pending federal investigation." I imagined her panicked confusion turning to pure terror as she heard a firm, insistent knock on her hotel room door. My phone buzzed on the desk, a sharp, jarring sound in the profound quiet of the study. It was a message from Elena. It wasn't words. It was a picture, likely forwarded from an FBI agent on site. The photo was taken with a cell phone under the harsh fluorescent lights of a hotel hallway. Isabella was in handcuffs, her silk resort wear looking absurdly out of place. Her perfect hair was a mess. Her makeup was smeared from tears of rage. And the mask of sophisticated charm was gone forever. All that was left was the raw, ugly face of a cornered animal, her eyes burning with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I stared at the photograph on my phone, the pixels glowing in the deep twilight of the study. Her face, twisted in a mask of pure, undiluted fury, was a stark contrast to the profound quiet that had settled over the room, over the house, over my entire world. The storm had passed. The frantic energy, the coiled tension, the cold, calculating rage that had fueled me for days, it was all gone. In its place was a vast, quiet emptiness. It wasn't sadness. It was the calm that comes after a fever breaks. Tyler sat across from me, utterly spent. He looked like a man who had walked through a war and had, by some miracle, survived. The weight of his guilt and the adrenaline of his performance had left him hollowed out. He simply stared at the polished surface of the desk, his hands limp in his lap. I finally switched off my phone, plunging the room back into the soft darkness, lit only by a single lamp. I didn't need to see the picture anymore. It was burned into my memory. The next morning, I was on the porch before the sun. The air was cool and clean, carrying the familiar scent of damp earth and distant livestock. The first blush of dawn was painting the eastern sky in shades of rose and violet. The sounds of the ranch waking up were a symphony. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed the lowing of cattle, the crow of a rooster, the rhythmic squeak of the old windmill turning in the gentle breeze. This was real. This was my legacy. And it was still mine. I felt the tension that had been coiled in my shoulders for months finally begin to unwind. My phone rang around 9. It was Elena. Her voice was as crisp and professional as ever, but I could hear a smile in it. "Good morning, Chester," she said. "I trust you slept well." For the first time in a long time, I admitted. "I have good news on 2 fronts," she said. "First, the sale contract, it's null and void. Given the mountain of evidence, the forged power of attorney, the recorded confession admitting to intentional fraud, our motion to have the sale invalidated will be a slam dunk. The title for Parcel C will revert to you by the end of the week. Marco Vargas's lawyers are already trying to cut a deal. But that's the FBI's problem now, not ours. Willow Creek is whole again, officially." A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees washed over me. It was one thing to know I had outsmarted her. It was another to hear the law confirm it. "Thank you, Elena. I owe you." "Oh, you do," she laughed. "But wait. It gets better. I've been on the phone with the U.S. Attorney's Office. They have successfully seized all of Marco Vargas's known assets, including the $2 million he used for the purchase, and a great deal more, because your family was a direct victim used to facilitate his money laundering. We are eligible to file a claim under federal civil asset forfeiture laws." I was quiet, processing what she was saying. "Let me put it in simple terms. Chester," she said, savoring the moment. "Isabella and her partner tried to steal a $15 million property from you. In the end, after the legal dust settles, not only will you have your property back in its entirety, but you are projected to receive a compensation payment from the government for approximately $12 million from Vargas's seized funds." She paused, letting it sink in. "She tried to steal your empire and ended up making you richer. It's the most beautifully ironic piece of law I've ever had the pleasure of executing." I couldn't help but let out a low chuckle. "Poetic justice." "And Isabella?" I asked. "The final piece of the puzzle. She's been denied bail." "Obviously," Elena said, her tone hardening. She's being extradited from the Bahamas to face a federal grand jury. They're hitting her with everything: conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, interstate fraud, forgery. The list is long. Given her documented history, which is now admissible, she won't see the outside of a federal prison for a very, very long time. She gambled, Chester, and she lost the whole damn house. After the call, I walked out of the house and just stood there, breathing the air of my reclaimed land. The victory was complete, absolute, but it felt strangely hollow. The war was over, but I still had to survey the damage done to my own family. I found Tyler down by the creek, skipping stones across the water with a listless, mechanical motion. He looked up as I approached, his eyes red-rimmed and filled with a shame so deep it was painful to see. We stood in silence for a while. The only sound, the gentle burble of the water over the rocks. "Dad," he finally said, his voice thick with emotion. There aren't any words. I'm sorry, doesn't even begin to cover it. It wasn't just the land. I betrayed you. I didn't trust you. I let her turn me against you, against everything you ever taught me. I was a fool, and I am so sorry. He finally looked at me, his face crumbling. A son finally admitting his deepest failing to his father. I looked out at the water, at the ancient oaks that stood as silent witnesses. I could have been hard. I could have told him he was right. But looking at the broken man before me, I knew that wasn't what was needed. The lesson had been learned in the cruelest way imaginable. You made a terrible mistake, Tyler, I said, my voice quiet but firm. It was a mistake that almost cost us everything. I won't pretend it wasn't. I turned to face him fully. But when the time came, when everything was on the line, you did the right thing. You faced the truth. And you helped me make it right. That matters. That takes a different kind of strength. He looked down, unable to accept the grace. I stepped forward and did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled my son into a hug. He was stiff at first. Then he just collapsed against me. The sobs he'd been holding back, finally breaking free. And I just held him, my own eyes burning, feeling the immense, complicated weight of being a father. Later that afternoon, I saw Tyler out by the west fence line, the one bordering the worthless plot of land Isabella had tried to steal. He was just checking the posts, running his hands over the wire. His shoulders slumped. I walked back to the barn, grabbed a post-hole digger and a bag of tools, and walked out to join him. I didn't say a word. I just handed him a pair of pliers and picked up the digger. Finding a spot where a post had rotted at the base, we worked for hours under the hot Texas sun, in a comfortable, familiar silence. The rhythm of the work was a language we both understood better than words. The thud of the digger, the scrape of the shovel, the sharp twang of wire being stretched and stapled. With every new post we set firmly in the ground, with every length of wire we tightened. I felt like we weren't just mending a fence, we were rebuilding something. Piece by painful piece, we were restoring the foundation of our own family. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long, golden shadows across the fields, we stopped, leaning against the newly taut fence line. We were dirty, sweating, and exhausted, and for the first time in a very long time, we were at peace. I looked out at the vast expanse of Willow Creek. My land. Or land. I had won it all back. But as I glanced at my son beside me, his face calm and his eyes clear for the first time in a year, I understood the truth. My legacy wasn't just this dirt, these wells, these cattle. It was him. It was the resilience to survive our own worst mistakes. It was the hard-won wisdom that trust should be earned, not given blindly. And it was the strength to mend what has been broken. That was the real inheritance. And it was one I could now, finally, safely pass on.